Hey y'all, Casey here. Welcome back to my Queer Comics History series where I talk about our queer and trans elders who paved the way for us today and don't always get the recognition that they deserve. The person I am covering today is a big reason why I even started this series. She was an incredibly talented person who I feel like almost never gets talked about when people are talking about queer and trans comics. I certainly wish I had known about her long before I did, so my hope is that this video helps other people find her sooner rather than later. Today, I will be talking about Jeffrey Catherine Jones. Jeffrey Catherine Jones grew up in Georgia, where she started drawing from a very young age. Unfortunately, she was rather discouraged from becoming an artist, so she went to study geology. However, eventually she decided that she just couldn't hold it back anymore. She had to be an artist. So she packed her bags in the mid-1960s and headed for New York City. When she first got to New York City, she dove headfirst into the book cover making world, where she made some beautiful covers for paperback books for publishers like Ace Books, who did a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. While primarily doing book covers, she honed her painted style. She also got work making comics, but she generally preferred her painted pieces. In interviews, she talked about how writing was very difficult for her, while illustrating came rather naturally. She said that writing even a paragraph a day was extremely difficult for her, versus making several illustrations was almost nothing. This likely explains why there aren't too many complete stories by Miss Jones. Jeffrey Catherine Jones is an interesting example of someone who was definitely involved in the world of comics, but was definitely an illustrator outside of that world first and foremost. She was very successful with her cover illustration work, and her work continues to be highly sought after. A piece she painted recently sold for $20,000. She even did some illustration work for Game of Thrones long before HBO ever existed. While her comics can be relatively difficult to track down, there are two that are relatively easy to find thanks to the internet. Those stories are called I'm Age and Idle. They're collected together in a single trade paperback. Idle originally ran as single-page stories in National Lampoon's magazine, while I'm Age ran as single-page stories in Heavy Metal magazine. She did some work for Archie Goodwin at Warren Publishing. However, those stories are much more difficult to find. She did a Vampirella story that I would freaking love to get my hands on one day. I'm also always looking to hunt down the two Wonder Woman covers that she did and her assorted horror work that she did for books like The Witching Hour and Eerie. She also did a bunch of non-Conan Robert E. Howard illustration work. Her National Lampoon series, Idle, is utterly gorgeous. It loosely follows a naked pregnant woman who just sort of wanders around and discovers things. It's done in Jeffrey Catherine Jones's pen and ink style, which is so whimsical and delicate. The narrative, or lack thereof, in Idle is not really my cup of tea, but for me, the illustrations make up for the writing that I don't particularly care for. The narrative tends to be somewhat nonsensical or made up of low humor, almost as if the drawings had been made first and then someone came in and randomly overlaid dialogue after the drawings had been completed. It creates a very odd contrast between the writing and the images. I'm Age, her series that she ran in Heavy Metal, is similar to Idle in its beauty and style and nonsensical writing. The one book by Jeffrey Catherine Jones that I do really like the writing in and have been able to get my hands on is a one-shot book called Ravens and Rainbows, which I believe is published by Pacific Comics. It's made up of a bunch of short pieces by Jones and is generally more straightforward than Idle or Image. The rock star moment for Jeffrey Catherine Jones was when she formed The Studio with other legendary artists Mike Kaluta, Barry Windsor Smith, and Bernie Wrightson in the mid-1970s. The members of The Studio were like the Beatles in the illustration world. They each had their own personalities and personas. They would throw these huge talked about parties in their shared space there in New York City. The members of The Studio put out a book together with bits and pieces of each of their work, that book, which is eponymously named The Studio, is still highly sought after to this day. I personally have never seen a copy in real life, but the images that I've seen on the internet look amazing. Another incredible artist that Jeffrey Catherine Jones was close with was Vaughn Bodie. Like Miss Jones, Bodie identified as a crossdresser in the 1960s and 70s. After Jones's marriage fell apart, Jones and Bodie got a house together in Woodstock, New York, where they were able to live together, support each other, and encourage each other to be who they truly were. Unfortunately, Bodie died quite young, so he wasn't able to live long enough to really figure himself out or know exactly what he was. This is evidenced by some of his later work, where he talked about playing with gender and trying to figure things out. But again, unfortunately, he passed and never got to know Catherine as she truly was. Jeffrey Catherine Jones lived the majority of her life as a man, but she started cross-dressing at a very young age. She was not able to be open about her cross-dressing, and when her wife found out, their marriage quickly dissolved. It wasn't until the late 1990s, after years of trying to suppress who she was with alcoholism, that she finally stopped caring about what other people thought and took the plunge. She started HRT, or hormone replacement therapy, in 1998 and lived out the rest of her days on this earth as a woman. Unfortunately, she didn't get many years in a body that she felt happy in, because she ended up dying in 2011 due to complications related to emphysema. Shortly before her death, though, she had said that she was far happier living as who she truly was than any of the years, even in those highly successful years when she was living as a boy. She said that her only regret was not transitioning sooner. The lifelong acting took a toll on her. Her mental health was not always great, and that was not helped by her abuse of alcohol. She had a number of what we would now call major depressive episodes in her life. One thing I greatly admire about Jeffrey Catherine Jones is that once she transitioned, she lived her life for her, not for anyone else. She kept her birth name as Jeffrey, but also added Catherine. She paid no mind to whether other people used he or she pronouns when referring to her. She cared about being who she was, not about whether other people saw her as she truly was. That was their loss in her mind, not hers. I'm sure this mentality came in handy because if you look at interviews of other people talking about Miss Jones, even after she transitioned, they consistently use he pronouns. And this is not to say that I am looking down on those people or judging them or anything. They had a relationship with Jeffrey Catherine Jones that I never got to have. So whatever words they used, that was between them. And as far as I can tell from my research, Jeffrey Catherine Jones didn't really have any bad blood with anybody over those kinds of things. While doing my research for this video, I came across a quote by Miss Jones that really hit home with me. She said, "I saw no one like me, so I became secretive. In my own mind, I became ashamed, guilty, and worthless." I have struggled with exactly the same thing, which is a big reason why I even started this channel. I don't want other people to have to feel that way. You're not alone, you're not worthless, and being who you are is nothing to feel guilty about. Even now, I'm saying that just as much to myself as I am to all of you watching. Don't let the fools drag you down. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you got something out of this video, please click those like and subscribe buttons. Until next time.